mentioned that it would be helpful to do a video that goes over some of the other types of analyses you can do in SPSS when you're looking at the quality of a measure. So here I've got data from the PHQ-9. This is a measure of depression symptoms in a sample of individual. I have some data from actual sample and then some mock data. We're going to pretend this is a measure that I created. And so here are the items in my measure. This is a 9-item well, I have 9 items in my item pool, and I want to see how these items function for a overall measure. I've also have some data on participants in this particular sample. Let me actually delete this because I have that information already in here. So um, this is the information from the participants, the PHQ-9. There's also participant age, there's participant sex, and then I have the overall mean. So the mean is the average value for each participant. So on this scale, this 1, 2, 3 scale, the average value you can see for individuals is calculated here, and then the total score for each individual. And then I've got some mock data for an anxiety scale. So let's say I want to do a couple things. First, let's say that I know that PHQ-9 scores typically are associated with symptoms of anxiety. So depression symptoms do have a modest correlation with anxiety symptoms. And so I want to demonstrate that my new measure in this situation, I've got a mock new measure, and say that I expect there to be some overlap. If we're talking about some of the tests that you all did, maybe what you'd expect there to be some correlation between would be performance on an achievement test, for example, and information on GPA. So those are the kinds of things that you can look at, what those correlations might be. So to do a correlation analysis, I'll just have you do the quick version of this. What I'm going to do is look at my total score for my PHQ compared to the summary score of this mock anxiety measure. So these are total scores on a mock anxiety measure. These are total scores on the PHQ-9, and we're pretending like the PHQ-9 is a measure that I created. What I notice here, first thing I notice is actually these 3 circles, and I want to change that because what that is saying is that my PHQ total is currently nominal, and I don't want that to be nominal. I want that to be scale. And then I also want my anxiety, my mock anxiety, to be scale. I want SPSS to treat these as just numbers and to do various calculations on them based on that. So in order to actually look at the correlation between the PHQ-9, so we're pretending this is my mock scale, and anxiety symptoms, so I'm going to do total versus total. I could do mean versus total here. It would give the same general information, but I'm just going to do total versus total score. So we go to analyze. This is the easiest, I guess, most straightforward way of doing this. Correlate. And then we're doing bivariate correlation. So for bivariate correlations, what I want to do is scroll down to my variables of interest. And here, like I said, I'm doing my total scores, highlighting the 2 that I'm interested in correlating, moving them over. You can check options to see if you want information on means and standard deviations. You can check that off just to give you a more complete picture of the information. Pearson will be checked off, two-tail will be checked off, flag significant correlations will automatically be checked off. If you want to go ahead and run it, you can hit OK. If you want to see what's happening, what the syntax is to copy and paste and maybe do it later, hit paste. Paste will bring up a syntax file. You can highlight this, copy it, and you can save it in another document. Now I know if you're using remote desktop, you can't save it in that same way, so this would be more of an on-campus, either that or you can take, I guess you can write them down and then type them in later if you're using remote desktop, but otherwise, if you're on campus and you want to save it for copy and paste later, then you can do that. Now if I'm ready to run it now at this point that I've looked at my syntax just to see what's going on, then I will go ahead and hit this run selection or play sign. And then I get my correlations. And look at that, my mock data is very strongly correlated between the PHQ-9 and anxiety symptoms. So much so, 0.90, 0.91 actually rounding up, would suggest almost that they're redundant, and that if you have one score, you really know information about the other ones. Now, in actuality, depression symptoms and anxiety symptoms are not that strongly correlated, but as I made up data, it turned out that the made up data for anxiety symptoms for this example, or the mock data I put in, was highly correlated. So if I were to offer a explanation of this, I would indicate this as something, or as a result that demonstrates the validity of my measure by saying, okay, well, depression symptoms have been shown in the research to correlate with anxiety symptoms. And I created this measure of anxiety, or of depression, and I compared it with an established measure of anxiety, and look, they're correlated. So that is an indication that this measure is doing something like what I expect it to do. However, what it does not prove is that my depression scores don't actually just measure anxiety symptoms as opposed to depression. So to go further, I would want an established depression measure and correlate the two of those in order to demonstrate convergent validity. So that's an example of how to do a correlation in SPSS. So I could also do the same if we wanted to see how my data might be correlated with age. I can leave anxiety in there, and I can add age to see what's going on there. That's going to give me a new, and let's see. So here, also, for those who may be not familiar with correlation tables, I kind of was assuming folks were, but let me just double click on that so I don't have these pop-up windows. Here we have the column for PHQ total, column for anxiety, column for parental age, and then in the row, this gives us our Pearson correlation. PHQ total versus PHQ total, of course, is going to be 100% correlation, or correlation of 1, because it's the same thing. This is PHQ total versus anxiety, statistically significant. 2 stars means it's at the 0.01 level, 1 star is at the 0.05 level. Age, we see this parental age being negatively correlated with PHQ total score, which means depression symptoms decrease for this sample as participants are older in age. So those who are older have lower depression symptoms, and this pop-up window shows you what I said about the single star, that its correlation at the 0.05 level. So this tells us PHQ-9 going across anxiety and parental age. We get the same information going down this way. So PHQ versus anxiety, PHQ versus parental age. That's the same, that's the same. When you present information on a correlation table, you do not need, and you should not, keep information that is reflected, the reflection information. You should just have one side of the table. So oftentimes what is done is that is just all deleted for the purposes of writing the information up in a paper. Now in SPSS, when I delete those, these little asterisks stay, and they don't actually delete. But when you create a table in a paper, you would want this section to be completely empty and just have your correlation table that highlights the correlations. Actually, furthermore, officially, you would also take out these rows to present information in a correlation table. This is not going to be terribly easy to delete, but let me pull up a example of a correlation table for you all. I'm just going to go to Google Images. I'm sure they'll have a good example. So yes, this is what a standard correlation table would look like. As you see, it only has one side of the reflection. So this is showing here we've got our variables 1 through 11. Oftentimes, well, the APA format, often what you'll do is you'll put just the number value in the top, demonstrating what that is or coinciding with the particular variable. And then you'll see means and standard deviation, not required to put in tables, but they're nice to have and they are common to put in the tables. Although the most updated APA standards may have this officially in your correlation table. But you'll see some will have it as columns on the left, to the left of your correlation data, and sometimes you'll have the means and standard deviations as two rows on the bottom of your table. So just to show you what the proper formatting, APA formatting is of a table. And this is more of the standard basic table. It doesn't have the means and standard deviations for your variables in the table as well, just the correlations. Okay, so that's how you obtain correlations.